Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. What an interesting conversation with Frank Stronach, one of the most successful and interesting Canadian entrepreneurs, worth, in the top 10 or so richest people in Canada, created a huge amount of jobs, huge amount of wealth for himself and for others. And I think that his 7 points for his economic Bill of Rights makes a lot of sense. I wanted to step back for a second and talk about where we are as a country and where we are from a fiscal standpoint, a policy standpoint, and to also, frankly, put my week of interviews into perspective. I've been involved in politics peripherally for most of my adult life. I've been very active in a bunch of different policy development. I actually wrote policy papers for Paul Martin at one point in time in my youth. I don't think we as a society have come to the realization about how bad our economic situation is today. We have got debt that is at astronomical levels and higher from a personal standpoint by a factor of 2, double than the United States. We've got housing prices that, while they may have come down a little bit of late, are at twice the levels of personal disposable income as they are in the United States. A level of unaffordability that is unparalleled in our history and probably unparalleled worldwide, other than maybe a couple of major cities that have comparable pricing. We have, I think, stolen from the younger generation the dream of a better economic future. We are one of the first generations. We are the first generation in history to right now be thinking about passing on to the next generation a worse economic future than every other generation in history has done. We have high interest rates. We have high inflation rates. We have high taxation rates. We have low productivity. In fact, according to an interview that I'm going to do tomorrow with Jack Mintz, no productivity growth in the last number of years, while the United States has been racing ahead. We have a economic size that has gone from 7th in the world. We're no longer a G7 country, to 9th, supposedly, if you do it based on US dollars. But according to him, if you do it on purchase price parity, which actually makes more sense, we're like number 16th position. We aren't meeting our NATO commitments. We have a military that can't do the job in Haiti that the United States asks us for, seemingly can't be involved in Eastern Europe the way that United States and other NATO countries are contributing to the war in Ukraine. And some people lately have said couldn't even defend our national sovereignty in the Arctic if something came to pass there. What's gone wrong? I think local government, provincial government, and federal governments have a level of bureaucracy and red tape that is unsustainable. And it has led to way too much employment in the civil service and in regulation and red tape, such that it becomes a self-justifying prophecy. They've got jobs, so they need to do stuff, so they need to regulate more. We have, according to numerous different studies, and Jack Mintz is going to talk about this tomorrow night, we have the longest regulatory approval process for housing with local governments and for natural resource developments with provincial or federal governments. It's unsustainable. People don't want to build here. People don't want to invest here. People, critical minerals are something that the world needs more of if we're going to convert to more sustainable electrical batteries and vehicles, et cetera. But we can't create a business case. And the reason why we can't create a business case in Canada is because there's no certainty of a reasonable timed regulatory approval. We have debt and deficit that is ballooned. We were in a situation comparable to this, the Canadian peso crisis in the early 1990s. It took a couple of years for everyone to realize it. And when it happened, finally, we had to cut government spending by 20% a year, including provincial transfers, which go to healthcare. And we're in a situation now where we have less flexibility in that regard because we are awaiting the coming tsunami of the baby boomers, people like myself that are getting into that age where they're going to be drawing upon far more of the healthcare dollars, their their long-term care dollars, their pension dollars, their pharmacare dollars as we use more medicine. The statistic is something like 80 to 85% of your lifetime healthcare expenditures are spent in the last 18 months, 2 years of life. So that healthcare expenditure, long-term care expenditure, pension expenditure, pharmacare expenditure, dental expenditure is only going to go up in the future, and only pensions are pre-funded. So cutting government spending, let alone leave it flat, is going to be an even greater challenge today than it was in the 1990s, but it's urgent today, and we need to think about that. And so I think that what Frank Stronach is talking about in regards to an economic charter of rights makes a lot of sense. And it's something that I think all of us need to really address and realize that this is a critical time in our history with, yes, COVID that dramatically impacted us all. But you've got to be prepared and be resilient to take those kinds of things that can happen, whether it's once a century or more frequently. And when you think about it, we had in 2000 the tech bubble crash, and then in 2008 the global financial crisis, and then COVID. And so therefore, these events seem to be happening not once a century, but once a decade. And we've got to do something. And I think the only solution is that we've got to dramatically increase our productivity, our capital investment, our productivity that then leads to increased GDP per person, because we've got to create more wealth before we think only about redistributing it. And to do that, we've got to reduce our taxes. To reduce that, we've got to reduce our spending and reduce our government deficits and reduce our government debt. And that's going to take a Herculean effort by our federal, provincial governments. And from an affordability standpoint, I fail to see how we can trust these governments that have created such an incredible problem from a regulatory red tape standpoint and dramatically reduced supply such that we are building fewer homes today than we were in the 1970s, and think that these are the people that are going to solve our problems in the future. So I think Frank Stronach's call to action is incredibly well timed, and frankly, I think it's more urgent than even he suggests it is. Anyway, a few wonderful thoughts. I'm going to follow up today's conversation with Frank Stronach with a conversation tomorrow with Jack Mintz talking about the fiscal crisis. On Wednesday, I'm going to make it personal with Scott Terrier talking about consumer insolvency and the debts that are increasing. And then on Thursday, I'm going to talk about Ukraine and how critically important Ukraine is and the fight against authoritarianism and the fight for freedom and free enterprise and capitalism and democracy is for our world. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.